Next up, with an introduction to the member self-service update to CalPERS, we have Deanna Herrera.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Deanna Herrera. I am from our internal employer training unit. We assist with training our employer contact center agents within the customer service and outreach division. So today I'll be showing you guys the recent enhancements that were done to the CalPERS for members. Has anybody actually logged into their own account and used it? Okay, so a few of you have done so. So with the release, again, the purpose that we're here today is to kind of show you those previews that were recently released in January of this year. So over the past about 6 months, starting in July of last year, we did have some enhancements that were enabling members to look at their own specified accounts, shows real up-to-date account information. In October, additional releases were done. So as you can see on your guys' handouts, they were able to go ahead and do open enrollment transactions for retirees. So if they wanted to do those for those enrollment transactions taking effect January of this year, as well as service credit purchase information, they were able to view those. Again, those were the purchases that they submitted after July of 2012. And then with our most recent release in January of this year, members can now actually start applying online for retirement. Again, these are only for service retirements. They cannot do disability or industrial disabilities. Also, if there's any type of community property issues or claims on their accounts, or if they're going through a split, they will not be able to apply for those either. There's also enhancements done to the retirement estimate calculator. Prior, they were only able to do one beneficiary. Now they can do multiples. And we'll kind of show those as we go through the presentation. We'll be able to see the new screens. Also, with the new enhancement, retirees can now actually start adding or deleting dependents on their account, which is a little bit more convenient for them. Rather than having to call in or send in a paper, they can actually just go online and do it themselves. So saves them some time. So again, with the new features on the next page, they can apply for retirement, they can change their health dependents, as well as maintain their payment options. So again, maybe if they want to enroll into direct deposit rather than getting a paper check in the mail, they can do so. And then again, with the enhancements, they now have additional options in the retirement estimate calculator. So gives them more things to be able to help plan for their retirement. So we're going to go ahead and look at the retirement estimate calculator and see what those screens look like. On the first page, again, they will now be able to see their beneficiary. They'll be able to indicate how many beneficiaries do you want to include. Previously, they could only do one. That was the only option for them. Now, with the new screens, they can indicate multiple beneficiaries up to the total of 8. So it gives them that option of, well, how many people? Maybe they have multiple children that they want to include. That is now a new option for them. With the final compensation, again, the system would override a lot of information that was there for them of their final compensation. The new enhancements is just simply renaming that page. And again, they can still go in and change the final compensation amount if they like to do that. So maybe they figure 10 years, I'll be making maybe 1,000 or 2 more. They can go in and change that final compensation to what they feel is adequate for them. On the continuing of the retirement estimate calculator, again, with the beneficiary information, there is a new page that is informing them of what items that are available for their beneficiaries. So they can include if they want to do a date of birth for that beneficiary, as well as they can indicate how they want that beneficiary to get paid. Do they want it in maybe an equal amount, maybe even for multiple beneficiaries? How they want it dispersed. Do they want it to be in equal payments? If it's a flat dollar amount that they are to receive, so they can actually indicate that or do it by percentage. So they can provide that information in the estimate. Now on the estimate results changes, now they will have the option to see option 1 and option 4 on the estimate. Previously, those were not features that were available to them, so they could not actually see that, those totals at the end. They can actually edit information if they wanted to do that. Maybe they decide, you know what, I want to include one more beneficiary, or I want to change my final compensation amount. They can actually make those changes on these pages in order to reflect that information. So you can see here, when they're deciding to make those changes, if they would like, there will have an edit link next to those fields so that they can make the appropriate changes. So again, completely up to them. They don't have to. It'll just give them a summary, though, of what they would possibly be receiving, as well as their beneficiaries if they were to pass. So now looking at, we're going to go ahead and go to the apply for retirement. So again, these screens will show you what they can actually do when they're trying to apply for retirement. So on the opening page, there will be a new link at the top for, again, active members. If they're already currently retired, they're not going to have this link because, again, they're already retired. There's no need for them to apply if they're currently receiving a warrant. So, of course, we're always going to suggest, please attend a class. Please go ahead and get an estimate. They do not have to. It's not required. But we still want to try to encourage that extra education for them so that they're making the right choices. If they want to proceed with applying for retirement, there's that little green button at the bottom of the page that shows to start their application. And from here, they'll be prompted into entering their retirement information. So they have the retirement date field, which they can indicate their retirement date of their choosing. The date that they can enter in will allow them to go 9 months retro. So 9 months from the date of retirement that they are indicating, not the current date, but 9 months from the date of the retirement that they are choosing. So they can go 9 months. On the right-hand side, you do see a status bar. It is simply just a status bar. They cannot actually select those individual links to go to those pages. They have to complete it as it's going through the process. So it's just to kind of show them where they're at and what page that they're on. Now, about their retirement, again, it's going to ask them to submit some additional information. It's going to ask them, are you part of a reciprocal agency, whether or not if they're married. So again, those required questions they're going to have to select yes or no to. Depending on their answers, it's going to be dependent on what additional information is needed. So they might need to enter additional information. So for instance, if they selected yes to reciprocal system, they need to indicate, well, what's that reciprocal system and what's your retirement date with them? If it was for the last part, if they're married in a domestic partnership, well, they need to indicate what's that marriage date? What's that domestic partnership date? So again, if they have no as a question, then they don't have to worry about that. So again, they'll be required to enter in additional information on top of it. Also, if they are currently enrolled into health benefits, it will give them an option to decline the health enrollment. Again, only if they're currently enrolled. If they do not currently have health benefits, that box will not populate for them. So only if they're currently covered. Now on the select options and beneficiaries pages, again, this is where they'll be able to choose what option that they want at retirement. Do they want to do an unmodified allowance, do an option 1, maybe an option 4? They can select which one that they feel that they want to retire with. So they'll be able to do that. With their beneficiaries, they'll also be able to indicate what beneficiaries they want to give their benefits to. Now, the system is automatically going to pull whatever existing dependents that we have listed on their account. If they're not listed, the ones that they want to include as their beneficiary, they can add them by selecting that Add New Beneficiary. So they will enter all the information, as you can see on the next screen. It's going to have them put in some additional information. So it's not on this one, it'll be on the next one, sorry. But they'll be able to add in their name, their date of birth. Everything will have a required field that's needed. So they'll be able to do that and proceed with the process. Now, for retired death benefits, again, they'll do the same thing. They'll be able to indicate what beneficiary that they want to provide these death benefits to. So they'll be able to select the applicable dependent for that, as well as they can indicate if they want it split equally by a percentage, a flat dollar amount, so they can indicate that. Again, the total has to equal 100%. So if they have multiple beneficiaries, they have to make sure at the end it equals 100. And the system will show whether or not if it equals 100 or not. As you can see on that slide, at the very bottom, it'll show 100% for them. For survivor continuance, the system will automatically know whether or not if the member has survivor continuance through their employer's contract. So if your agency contracts for that benefit, this screen will populate indicating your agency has this benefit and it'll require for them to answer additional questions. So if your agency does not have those benefits, then this page will not populate for the member. So it'll go along with the next page for them to fill out. Now for tax withholding, so just like it does on our regular applications, they're gonna be required to put in their federal and state tax information. So again, if they wanna not have any withheld, they wanna do the tax tables, or if they wanna indicate a flat dollar amount, they can do so on both federal and state. They just need to indicate it. For payment, they can indicate if they want a personal or a trust account. For personal, they can have direct deposit, they can do paper check, or have the check sent to their bank. Again, we don't really highly suggest the bank option, but it is there for them just in case if maybe the member lives maybe out of state or out of the country. So that still is an option for them to do. Now, if they are doing direct deposit, of course, they're going to be required to input their account number as well as their routing information. The system will cross-verify the routing information to make sure it is an actual financial institution. So they want to make sure that they're entering that information correctly. And then this will give them a review page showing them everything that they've entered in, everything that they've selected. They can make any changes at this point if they want to before they actually submit the application. Once they're ready to submit, again, everything's done electronically, so there's no more need for a notary on their application. Okay, so they can actually sign and submit everything e-signature and get it sent to CalPERS electronically. If they decide they don't want to submit it online, they will have an option to print the application, and that application will pre-populate everything that they inputted. That application, of course, will have to be notarized. So because they're doing it papered, they can always go into a regional office, get it notarized, and submit it. But if not, they'll just do the e-signature and complete the process online. So once they submit it, again, it's going to give them the confirmation that their application was submitted. Any required forms that are needed from them to submit to CalPERS will be noticed on this page. So right now, the only form that we're going to require for them is going to be the spousal signature form. That form does need to be notarized. So they will need to go ahead and sign it, get it notarized, and turn it into CalPERS. They can upload it if they would like, rather than mailing or faxing it. They can upload it from this page as well. They can always come back to their application and upload it later. They can always go back to this page to see the status. So when they select on their retirement link, it'll show where the status of their application is. It'll show submitted, it could show pending or in progress. So they'll be able to see that information or if anything is needed. So they'll always be able to come back and verify that. So that was the retirement application portion of this. We're going to look now at the maintain payment options for the current retirees receiving a check. So this is a new link that is going to be populated for them in order to make these changes. So it'll show currently what they are, how they're receiving their check, whether if it's paper, whether or not if it is a direct deposit, they'll be able to see the current status of it. And of course, if they want to change it, they'll go ahead and start the process of the payment option. So again, they'll be able to indicate, do I want a direct deposit? Do I want a paper check mailed to my home? Or do I want it sent to my bank? Again, they choose the applicable field that they want to do. If they're doing a direct deposit, again, same as we saw in the retirement portion of this, they have to enter their account number, their routing number, and account name. If it is identified they have a joint account, the system's going to default it to their current spouse on file, because that's normally who you have a joint account with. If it's for some reason any other different joint account holder, they can add that new account information in. They just simply select that add in a joint account, and they can add their information in to identify that. So they can always change it. Again, with direct deposit, they can enter their routing and bank account number. They will have to verify those information in order to make sure that it is an account going to a correct financial institution. If they want to add a trust, there is going to be required fields in order for them to enter in. We need to know who's the trust name, when was the trust filed, what county was the trust filed. So all the things that are denoted by a required in the parentheses in red, they'll need to fill out. So they have to enter that information in. For mailing preferences, in order to get their statement each month, we'll ask them, do you want it paperless or do you want it sent in the mail? Completely up to them. These statements they can view in their CalPERS account, so they can always come back to them each month and print them out if they'd like to do that. But this will indicate how do they want those statements received. So they would just choose the applicable option. For the review, again, it's just going to summarize what they did. It's going to show what their current information is of what they chose for their payment. So if they chose direct deposit, it's going to summarize their account information and how they're receiving their benefit payment. As long as that's okay, they don't want to make any changes to it, they'll go ahead and continue with the process. Again, everything's done online, so they have to do an e-signature. Everything's submitted online. They're agreeing to the terms and conditions of the changes they're making to their retirement check. So they'll go ahead and do the e-signature portion for their check and then submit it. Once they submit it, at the very top, it will identify to them when this change will take effect. They will also receive a letter indicating when they can actually expect their first payment, this new method that they chose. So it tells them, make sure, do not change anything until you receive this letter, so that they know exactly, February 2013, I'm going to start receiving my direct deposit. So it will give them that confirmation so that they know when it's okay maybe to close out their other bank account, or when they can start expecting to receive it on the first of the month. So now we're going to go ahead and look at the change health dependents. Currently, right now, again, in October of last year, they were only able to do open enrollment transactions for retirees. Now, with this new feature and enhancement, they can add or delete dependents. Again, this is only for retirees. So if your active members need to make changes, they would still need to go through the HR department in order to submit those changes. From here, again, they can do medical or dental. Obviously, dental is only available for state agency retirees, but it will give them the option to change anything that they are currently enrolled into with CalPERS. So they'll be able to make those changes. When they go into the process to delete or remove, they can only do qualifying events. So maybe if they're getting married, maybe if there was a divorce, they'll be able to go ahead and do those transactions. They can only do one transaction at a time. So if maybe they're adding a new spouse and stepchildren due to a marriage, it's going to ask them, how many people are you trying to make these changes for? If they indicate more than one, it's going to prompt them to either fill out the HBD 30 or to call into the customer contact center in order to request the change. So they can only do one. But they'll go ahead and indicate, well, what is the reason that you're making this change? And what is the event date? When did this happen? So they'll be required to enter in that. And again, like I said, they'll be required to indicate how many people or dependents are you making this change for. So anything over one will pop up a message for them to call or fill out the form. From here, they need to indicate, well, what dependents are you making these changes to? Again, if they are existing on their account, they've been a dependent prior, it will populate them here where they can select. If they are not showing, if it's a brand new dependent that have never been on their account whatsoever, they'll be able to add their information in manually. So they'll select that radio button to add a new health dependent, and then it'll require them to enter in all of their information. So that's where on this page you'll be able to see exactly what information is needed. So they have to put in their first and last name, that is required. Middle name is optional. They would need to enter in their social security number, because we know socials are now required for any and all dependents, so they will need to include that. Their gender, their date of birth, what is the relationship to the member, and their dependent type. And again, depending on the reason that they're enrolling them, it might ask for the marriage date. For instance, if it was due to marriage. We didn't know when was the marriage date. So just depending on the reason that they chose will depend on whether or not what information is needed. From here, it will then go ahead and bring them to the review. So it's just doing a summary of what they actually are requesting, whether or not if they're adding or deleting, if they are, what the effective date's gonna be, and what the dependent's name is. So it's just a review. As long as they are okay with it, they'll be able to proceed with the process. So again, they'll review and sign, do their e-signature to agree to the transaction that they're completing. And then they'll go ahead and submit. So again, they are just authorizing the enrollment that they are choosing to do, and they're gonna submit it electronically. So once they submit their election, it'll bring them to the confirmation page. Again, this page is gonna show, well, when is this health transaction gonna take effect? It'll give them an effective date saying this will go into effect as of February 1st or March 1st, depending on what they submitted. And any and all documents that are needed for this transaction will be requested on this page as well. So again, if it's a marriage, they'll need a marriage certificate. They can upload the document if they have it, or it'll list a fax number and a mailing address where they can send those documents to as well. Again, just a copy. We don't need the originals. They just need to submit that information to us. From here, they'll be able to check the status of the transaction that they submitted. So maybe we need additional paperwork from them. It will show here what is needed. It'll show the status. Is it pending? Is it in progress? Or is it completed? So they'll be able to see that information and exactly what they submitted to us. Any questions regarding the enhancements? One second while they bring the mic.
Some of our districts provide for continuation of benefits after a person retires, either a time limit or an age limit where the employer will pay for the premium. Mm-hmm. So there's been confusion with some of the districts when employees go to retire. They tell them not to mark that they want to continue coverage because they're being continued through the employer. And consequently, what happens is then their benefits get dropped. Okay. So how is that supposed to work? Do they mark, yes, that they want to continue coverage, and then it gets processed somehow between PERS and the district?
For your guys, are they retiring exactly from STRS?
No, for PERS.
From PERS.
They're retiring from PERS, but some districts allow for the payment of their medical premium. They can have as many as 5 years or age 65 till Medicare kicks in. Okay. And so if they're retiring, let's say prior to age 65, mm-hmm. the employer will pay the medical premium for the employee. Okay.
So whatever it is in the contract when they go to retire, whatever is showing in there, because the system is going to match it up to the employer and to the member's account. Whatever that they have for that group that they're enrolled under, for their medical group, that's what's going to carry over for the payment. So the only reason why, so they're automatically going to continue into health benefits. If they want to decline it, that's when they want to select that checkbox.
Okay, so then they don't mark, I want to continue, and they don't mark, I want to decline.
It's going to automatically continue for them.
Okay.
Again, if it has, that 30-day time frame between their retirement date and separation date. Good question. Any?
You just mentioned that the members can retro their retirement date for 9 months,
correct.
Up to 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens if the employee or the members sub in between, maybe handful of time, 4 or 5 times? Do you tell the member to change their retirement date, or do you tell the employer to reverse those couple of days.
So let me make sure I understand. So you are asking whether or not when they're choosing a retirement date,
Going 9 months.
if they want to go retroactive,
But
whether or not
they-
if we tell them to call you guys to change their separation?
No, okay. Kind of what I'm asking is because it happened to us that the local office advised the member that they can retro up to 9 months. But the employee forgot that in the meantime, they did sub 4 or 5 times in those 9-month period. But then the district was calling us because they didn't want to say that the separation was 9 months ago. So I just wanted to know what is the best practice when things like that happen.
For those cases, again, if they want to alter their retirement date, with this particular process, it's simply they need to be active because
Yeah.
if they're or not active, but they have to be showing in the system as not already retired. So they can always go retro if they ever have a question on whether or not if something was already reported in the system or just any confusion.
So
Best thing is for either the employer, you guys can call into the contact center and they can look at the information. Or if you have to do some type of payroll adjustments to correct things, you'd have to do that first before.
But your system, let's say they did put in the date 9 months ago, but in the meantime, you saw there was some payroll information that went to your entity. Does it give an error message saying you cannot retire that date? Something to that order?
I'd have to look. Maybe my colleague, my SME over here, can answer that question for you. Or Terrence. Sorry, go ahead.
Hi, Bina. The retirement app or the retirement effective date is the day after the last day salary was
Right.
payable. That's 21252A.
Yeah. What happens is, let's say 9 months ago, the employee did tell the district they are terminating.
Okay.
And then now, in between, maybe they sub 2-3 times. And then when they fill in this form, they gave the original termination date. So this was something that happened to us where we were caught in between because the district wants to say the termination date is after the subbing date, but employee wanted the original termination date when they terminated because innocently they sub in between.
Those would be like those case-by-case basis where we'd have to look whether or not if the original permanent separation was already entered in, and if they did sub, was there a new appointment entered in and payroll reported? And when was the application submitted to us?
But when they
So-
enter online, is it going to give them a error message that they cannot retire that date?
Do you know, Sean, will that pick up that they show a pay rate being or earnings reported? I can't imagine the system would allow them to retire before that.
At the time they submit the application, we're not going to present an error message. What'll happen is it could fall out in the back end, and then we'll review it. And if we see any issues, then we can notify the member or do our review to make sure that's a valid retirement date that they're using.
Employers, they don't know that the employee went 9 months retro, and they call the employee to come and sub. So that's why I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, but it should fall out on our back
Okay.
end, and then we'll do the additional review to make sure it's a valid
Okay.
retirement date.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Another question up here.
I have a few questions. I appreciate that you did this.
No problem.
A
You're
lot.
welcome.
But one thing, on the survivor continuance, I'm wondering why the financially dependent parents isn't on here. Is it just because there wasn't enough room, or has that been removed as a survivor?
Maybe Sean, you can address that regarding the survivor continuance of the financially dependent parents.
Financially dependent parents should be on there. I don't know if that was just an issue with the screenshot per se, but yeah, it should be on there.
Because the screens have changed since this was originally created. And again, it was deployed back in January, so anything that had been changing or enhancements would reflect now currently. But again, they may not be on the slides because these were created prior to that.
Okay. All right. And another question. the employer's now supposed to put the unused sick leave in there in the separation. Okay, I keep getting questions. At what point should they be putting it in there? 3 months in advance, like we used to fill out the, the employer section of the retirement application, or the date they retire, or, because I don't want to stop their retirement. It sounds like there's a timeline issue here. If I don't have the separation in there by the retirement date, is it going to mess up their retirement?
For the unused sick leave, I believe that once they are, if the permanent separation's in there, they have to have that perm step in the system first before they can actually go in and edit the unused sick leave information. Because normally it's gonna be put on the actual retirement application. So again, the amended employer certification form has gone away. That is no longer being used. So the only time that you would actually go in there and edit the unused sick leave is once that perm step is already entered into the system. Then you'd be able to go in and edit it.
Okay, so I could put it in 3 months in advance and then go and change it the day they retired if they took a day or two or something?
Correct.
Okay, and if I don't have my separation in there on their retirement date, are they going to get an error on their retirement? Is it going to mess them up? Do I need to let employers know I need that separation in here before their retirement date?
It's not going to impact their allowance. The worst case scenario is that we would adjust the retirement allowance after retirement if there was any adjustment to the sick leave.
Okay, so you're going to process a
We're
retirement
still
without
going to
me doing a
process the retirement.
separation?
Yep.
Okay, that doesn't sound good.
Because again, the system's gonna cross-reference, well, what was the last payroll information on file? As long as payroll's still not being reported, the submission of the retirement application is still gonna go through. So again, with the member self-service, they're just submitting the application. There's still back-end stuff that our internal staff are doing to make sure that everything is in line in order for them to start receiving a check. So this is simply just the submission of the application.
Okay, now I can see where we would want to have to assist them with this as an employer. So I get a lot of complaints because I try to get them to set up their CalPERS and it's like, oh, they resist it.
Yeah.
So is there a way, like if they are having trouble with that account, that, I mean, their only option is to go through the 800 to get set up
Correct.
if I can't get them on there on the day they come in because they forgot their
Correct.
password or something?
Correct. Yeah, the only other options they have at this point is to call in with any assistance. The member call center agents have the information available to them in order to help them walk them through that process in order to get them registered.
You can't give that to an employer where we can assist them with their own accounts. I mean, I can assist employers with their password change and all that, but I mean, with my employees
Yeah.
coming in, I'd like them to use this. Now, I noticed that you guys, last week, I wasn't able to find the service retirement application online. Normally, I could go in there and click on it and print it up, and last week I wasn't able to access it. Are you going to force them to use this, or are you still
No.
going to have paper apps?
Still gonna have paper apps.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And we can take that offline though regarding the procedures on how you guys can assist your members with registration. Thank you.
On
Great
the
question.
separation, can I add then? So the SEP does not impact, they can go through this process 90 days in advance, right? Then when you're SEPing them on their retirement date or upcoming retirement date, that's when you, upon that separation, you key in that sick leave at retirement, or sorry, at separation date. Right, so you're not keying in that information 90 days in advance. You're keying it in at the time they separate. Just when they separate, and then we'll pick it up because the whole purpose of that is so we get more accurate data, so we don't have to adjust it again later, and it's one time done. The only time you should fix it if for any reason you keyed the wrong amount or a typo, whatever it might be, or something fluctuated that you didn't know about, that's when you'd come in on the back end and correct that separation.
What if the separation date I put in changes something on their retirement? I mean, if I put in the same, say they separated later or something, so it will change their retirement date. I mean, what's going to happen there? How does that play out?
Yeah, that would need to be worked out. If we already have keyed the retirement date, it won't allow you to input that separation date prior to the retirement date. So there's a lot of things that are timing dependent there that we'd have to work out on a case-by-case basis. Hopefully, it all lines up when you input that that SEP date that it's the same.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Let's take our 15-minute break and reconvene here just after 11 o'clock. Thanks.